Zineb, welcome. Tell us who you are, what you do.
Hello, everyone. Happy New Year to everyone that's watching. My name is Zineb. You can call me Z. So I have two gems. One of my main gem, I'm a marketer. I run a marketing consultancy where I help early stage startups learn from their customers so they can stop doing stupid stuff, basically. And my other gem is I co-founded PitchSlap. We do pitch mentoring, investor pitch mentoring for early stage startups also.
How many languages do you speak? That's a fun fact.
5.
Oh man, more than me.
That is intense. I'm liking that.
Beat
Yeah,
that,
in
Amy.
here it's intense.
There's no beating that. I speak one and poorly at times. So I'm Amy Quick. I'm on week 1 as the director of inside sales for a company called Stream. I just recently transitioned into this role. So I'm really stoked to be on this call because go-to-market is pretty much, there's been no outbound prospecting done up until now. So we're building out our entire process and everything. So this meeting is very relevant to me as well. So I might be stealing some advice. And an interesting fact, I'm maybe morbidly obsessed with World War II and the Holocaust. Like I really I wouldn't say I love that time period, but it's very near and dear and personal to me. And so that would be a weird fact about me. I'm like really into history and that specific period of history. There we go.
Love it. Patrick.
Hello, I'm Patrick. I have a bunch of these weird cat things that I got for Christmas, so you're going to see those a lot. I am a mid-market account executive at an HR tech company called Sapling. I was the head of sales enablement at PandaDoc and also an outbound sales manager. Fun fact about me, I was actually a local band manager before I was in sales for like 2 years. I don't think I've even talked to you guys about this in Phoenix. So I did all the bookings, ran the website and everything, and I thought I was going to do that. And then here I am.
Wow, that is a good fun fact. I did not know that. JC, tell us who you are, what you do, my man.
Hey all, JC from Guadalajara. I run a sales development as a service agency out of Mexico, 15 team. And I guess a fun fact about me is that I'm just very intense about exercise, and I've been doing triathlons and Ironman for the last 8 years. So I guess that's kind of fun.
That's a fun fact. I like it. All right, Trent, the mic is yours.
Cool. This is my first time on the presenting end. I've been lucky to join the 5 on Friday crew before. So I'm looking forward to getting harassed by Mr. Downs over there. So that's great. I am Trent Anderson. I'm the head of RevOps at Podchaser. And this is the last day of week 2 for me at Podchaser. What I do is basically align our entire go-to-market team. So that's sales, CS, and marketing. We've had a lot of really good success with one vertical, one kind of industry, one buyer group. As we're looking to scale, we need to expand use cases, which means expanding personas, which means we have to make sure that the product is going to fit those personas. So what I like to get out of this is just like candid feedback from you guys. Like, is this cool? Does this make sense? How can I better position this? Because we've been primarily a sales-led group from our founders, and we are venture-backed. We did Series A kind of at the next jump here. Like, are we going to go to Series B? Are we going to get acquired? Whatever it is. But no matter what we do, we want to make sure that we have a larger TAM and a larger, realistic market too. So that is the TLDR. I can talk about like what Podchaser is probably before when we get this thing jumped off. But a fun fact about me, when I was 3 years old, my dad took a job change from Chicago to Cleveland, and our next door neighbor was Mark Price, who was the all-time leading free throw percentage completion record holder for the NBA. So unfortunately, genetics did not bless me to be in a position to leverage Mr. Price's tutelage. However, that's a fun fact. So
I like it. Awesome. Well, how do you want to use the time? I was, a couple of the nuggets you threw in the email kind of piqued my interest because I didn't do any homework. Like I just saw Podchaser, thought podcast industry, but what you threw in the email about, I don't want to spill all the tea, but how you're wanting to position it looked really interesting.
Yeah. So talking about like the go-to-market organization, right? I've worn a SVP, VP, or C-suite hat in sales and marketing. I've never formally owned any sort of CS except for like account management on a post sale. And I've almost always had to like support post sale in my career. So I'm intimately familiar with how to do the thing for sales and how to do the thing for marketing. And what we're trying to get to a point of with the CS is actually identifying who our best fit customers are, and then being able to double, triple, and quadruple down on those, success factors that we have, which is, and some of it is product led, and some of it's just like, sentimental value that they're getting out of the tool, that sort of thing. So just, I put that up there as the 30,000 foot view. As far as like what Podchaser is and what Podchaser does, it's at this point the largest podcast database that exists right now. So we have over 3.5 million podcasts. We have a couple different metrics. We pull data from all the major podcast players. We have our Pro tool, which is what I want to talk mostly about today. And our Pro tool offers up audience insights. So not just like, hey, Joe Rogan gets the most, but like, here's what a detailed demographic looks like for his audience. And we have advertisers, it's like direct to consumer brands and like agencies that are leveraging our database to get better podcast opportunities from an appearance perspective, as well as an advertising perspective. So again, if a brand advertiser's ICP matches that of a given show, they have access to that data, they can leverage that data, and we provide the contact information for them to actually reach out to that show directly, so they can start to broker any sort of advertising or sponsorship opportunity there. So that's been very popular among what I'll call like PR agencies, again, brand marketing agencies, basically like the folks that are at the forefront of like the quote unquote podcast industry, have been leveraging that quite a bit. But coming from a sales background, there's this whole world of personalization at scale. Like, how do you be more relevant in outbound messaging? Some of the folks that I look up to in that category of sales development, sales coaching, obviously are like Josh Braun, Beck Holland, name 18 other ones, right? Patrick Downs, yeah. So we're very, very, very good at closing new business for PR agencies and brands. That's, in those use cases, are typically a marketer or a media buyer or whatever. Like, I know how to get into their minds and say what we need to say in order to sell them. But if we want to expand and hit our revenue goals, we need to find additional buyer groups within these organizations so we can land and expand wider within these orgs. So my big conundrum here is, can salespeople actually leverage our research, our insights, our database to build out better sales messaging and from an outbound perspective, based on what they can find in the database?
And like, I personally, I think the answer is yes, because I think Patrick and probably Amy were on like over a year ago when Benjamin was on with Cheetah IQ, right? So do you remember that one, Trent?
I
don't.
He ended up selling the product, but it was fairly early stage. But it was basically, he was saying, hey, I know salespeople do all this research for personalization, and it was this one tool to rule them all. You put in prospect company and it would look at their 10K, it would look at their news results. It would even look for any mention of them in a podcast. And I remember all of us were like, well, nothing does that. And so what to me, it's definitely relevant. I think he was going after like individual reps because he was having a hard time going to the top because they would kind of prove it out. But I'm also really curious, like, who is your competitor?
Like, well, there's not. Grease? I mean, yeah, right. I mean, so like,
you got scarcity, then that's good.
When I was looking into like personalization, whatever the crest of that movement was, call it like 2-3 years ago, I'm like, oh wow, people actually respond to emails when they're relevant to them based on what you know about them. Like, this is crazy. You start looking into stuff, and like what people first started to do was just comb through their prospects LinkedIn and say, hey, saw you went to UCLA. How about the Bruins men's basketball program? And everyone was just like, Patrick's written novels about the horrors of personalization as opposed to customization, right? So that's why I respect the PD brand. So there's that. And I think like what Beck Holland calls it is like the different premises for reaching out, and self-authored content and self-identified traits are like very, very high up on the list. And I mean, again, being on the receiving end of some of these things, like I literally got an email, cold email 2 days ago because I was going through Twitter and someone was asking about like, someone found like a not crazy expensive product-led growth product tour. I was like, if you find one, let me know. And sure enough, I get an email from a rep that says, hey, I saw that you interacted with Alicia's tweet, whatever, like, if you're looking for something that's under 500 a month, like we have an opportunity here for you. So like, again, that's using Twitter as an example, but what other insights can you get? And one of the things I first started doing when I was trying to personalize stuff was listening to podcasts. But the problem was, short of searching somebody's name in a podcast player, like where could you find it? How could you follow it? How often would you go back to it? So to answer the question about like who our competitors are, I don't think anybody's utilizing the podcast stuff per se with like the sole intent of what I'm talking about.
But I think your ICP is probably all of us.
Yeah.
And then, but then like, I'll pick on JC, like if he's got a team of 15 SDRs that are doing like not hyper personalization, but personalization, but like at a large scale, that might be something that's interesting to them as well. But then you get into that, like you said, Trent, I can't remember the exact terminology, but you know, if you're going to be emailing 100 people a day, you can only get so much personalization. If you're emailing 2, then you're going to do this mountain of research to really try and, you know, knock it out of the park. And so like my mind, the first thing that jumps to me is probably like a tool, like an outreach or something where it's going, okay, I popped in, you know, Zineb, and it says, okay, yeah, we're going to suck all this information from LinkedIn. And basically, and I'm guessing maybe is there a tool that does this that kind of says, here's Zineb's profile, here's everything we could find about her kind of on the internet, right? So here's all her social profiles. And then you're just now another extension that says, oh, and by the way, she was on this podcast. You still got to probably listen to those snippets, but you know, seeing what she tweeted about or put on Instagram, like sometimes those don't land.
Right. Yeah, I mean, most of you guys, you probably use ZoomInfo or a similar tool, and ZoomInfo pulls in appearances. Like most of them are text-based, obviously. So like there was a press release and that person was mentioned in it, or they were a guest blogger, whatever. So that's kind of like the go-to-market question that we have right around this is, do we build out an API deal or an API structure with the ZoomInfo, which is a lot more money, right, for us, or do you attack the individuals that are leading sales organizations where we know that personalization is a key component? And how do you figure out if personalization is a key component of their sales process? Do they interact with Beck Holland's content on LinkedIn? If yes, you know, they're probably going to be a fit, right? So,
but let me pick on Patrick, for example. Like, you know, what would you pay for something like this?
I think the issue with this is it's just so specialized. Like it's hard to get like management or directors excited about something that does like one thing like this, even if it's really powerful. And I think Joe would probably tell you the same thing, because part of his product, which wasn't even just the podcast part, they had like 10 other things. And I think he had trouble getting people excited about even that. And it sounds like he sold to someone else. So I would want to try and go after like ZoomInfo, Owlware, like those kind of people, and sell the data or the product to them.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing, because it's also very niche who would use it. Like, you know, the average sales rep that's doing high volume outbound, like an SDR or something like that. And they're targeting multiple verticals, you know, in a pretty wide range of accounts. Like what I was doing at Fortinet was SMB, right? Thousands of accounts. It's going to be really hard to get hyper customization from, you know, I can't look at everyone, you know, and see what podcasts are on. But if I was selling at the enterprise space and I was looking at, you know, 2 or 3 core people per account, and my account subset was much smaller, well, then it makes sense because that's where I really need to stand out in customization. So I think that, yeah, to the point of, do you sell it as an API? Yes, that makes sense. But I think there is a market for it, maybe targeting true enterprise level sales executives that could use something like that. And they would buy it as essentially subscription, where I think you would get a lot of churn potentially doing it that way. But if you had, if you had a large demand, for it from enterprise sales executives, I mean, how many of them are out there? There's a massive market of enterprise sales execs. So
Yep.
it's just, how much of that market can you grab and how do you monetize it?
Mhm.
And I agree with Patrick. It's going to be hard to kind of figure out the monetary value of it because it is very specific with what it does. So I think selling the data, the idea of an API is probably, from a funding standpoint, you guys are getting ready to go after potentially Series B or take your ICP public. That makes more monetary sense because, cha-ching, and investors are climbing on the bandwagon. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
Do you think this is, I don't want to say it's similar to Lavender, but like, I've used the tool. I don't know how many people here have used it, but I think some reps, like they just pay for it themselves. And I would, oh, there you go. So,
Yeah.
People have obviously seen the value in it. And like, to Patrick's earlier point, like I think Benjamin with Cheetah was almost just like out there evangelizing, like on LinkedIn and getting in these types of events and talking to reps directly, because I think he was saying, like what Patrick was saying, the senior level people didn't see the value in it, but the reps were like, hey man, this helped me close 3 deals. It's paid for.
Yeah.
So,
and I was going to suggest Lavender
Yeah.
as one of those tools. So working backwards, like what has already been said, like if you're highly specialized and making fewer calls, then it could make sense. I don't know if the Lavender customers, most of them, do those types of calls, or is it more, I have 15 SDRs.
I think at Lavender, correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, well, and you use it as well as Zineb, it's not so much about the personalization, but your tonality, and I don't know if I'm using the right words, but helps you write a better email. I know that's pretty broad, but I know everybody that uses it loves it. Like it seems to be really popular.
Exactly, and this adds that level of customization, right? And yeah, I mean it's worth. I don't know, Trent, have you thought of approaching Lavender?
I have, as well as some of the other tools for sellers. I think what I don't want to do actually is, my experience with Lavender is I bought it for myself, right? I didn't activate it for our entire sales team, just like Patrick didn't. I've been in that SaaS world, and it's just the amount of work you have to do for individuals to find you and build demand and convert and then manage like churn. It's not really the business model we want to be in. I think like we are very much shifting from a lead based to an account based go-to-market motion for Podchaser, like as a whole, and that's across all of our product lines, API being one of them, Pro being one of them, and Connect being another one. So I would rather spend a lot more focus time with a larger impact, i.e. in like an enterprise sales process where I'm pitching a Zoom info on, hey, this is going to be an incredible value add for your baked in customers. All you have to do is license the API from us, and we're going to have this data pumped in. Now, my engineering team is probably going to, if they hear this, which I doubt they will, but if they hear it, they're going to say like, oh yeah, it's that easy, right? So, but in any case, right? Like,
so then now your prospects are like the Zoom infos, the Apollos, like there's only so many, but they're whales. Like you'd be chasing a few whales
for sure. I mean, and I can't divulge some of our API clients, but some of our API clients are the like podcast players that you use on a daily basis. So like those are 6 and 7 figure types of engagements. So that's worth it in my opinion.
An expansion into those accounts.
Correct. JC, I'm really interested to hear you give your thoughts on this, running an SDR outsource team.
Yeah, I would actually love to have a tool like this because personalization can only get us up to a certain point. And like Patrick was saying, you cannot just go and say, oh yeah, I went to, I saw you went to this school. How about, how are the team doing this season? It's just like, I don't know. I don't think that works. But like, so the way I see it, the way that some prospects respond to the emails, that we take an angle like similar to, the stuff that we would find on the podcast, is like, okay, you took the time to do the research, because they're not aware of this tool, obviously. So they think that you might have gone and actually listened to that podcast, which takes time. And in the sales world, time is very scarce. So, this would be a superpower for an SDR to, find something that Francois said a few months ago. And that might just be the thing that sparks his, kind of thought, like, oh, wow, these guys are really, taking that extra mile. So it's definitely a tool that I don't think I would use it as like Lavender, or I thought of Crystal Knows, you're probably aware of that tool as well. I would, just because we have so many tools, I cannot even think of how many tools we're using these days. So when I think of an extra Chrome extension, I just get lost. I just get bombarded on my screen of like all of these tools around my screen. And really, where most of the SDRs live is in the sales enablement tools. So outreach, outplay. So I would just, I agree with everyone here. I think if I'm writing or adding a list of leads, maybe there's a way that they can like pre-populate, the most recent podcast, and then you can choose whether to, bring that information into your first email or not. But yeah, it would be hard for me to think to implement it, from like Google Chrome or like standalone app. I would rather just have outreach provide that data to me, or outplay. Just makes more sense.
And what if Zoom Info said, hey, we're going to offer this now, but it's this much more?
That's the thing. That's the thing. I mean, it might be worth it. Again, if that's generating me conversations, then it kind of pays for itself. But maybe the pricing cannot be too crazy. Like what were they trying to upsell us on? I think it was intent, and I was like, heck, crazy. I was like, oh well, probably I can't afford that right now. So that's the thing. Like, how do you find that balance? Whether like a team like us can afford it, while we're already paying for outreach or Zoom Info, or not. So.
Yeah, that makes sense, because, well, the one thing I would say with being an add-on license, if it was monetized appropriately, I mean, maybe, that, because I don't think it would be a big high price tag, but if you have if Zoom Info has a customer that has 20 licenses or whatever, and it's a $20 license, subscription upcharge per license or something, in the grand scheme of things, it's not very expensive, but your deal will be with Zoom Info, so right. The upfront costs could be beneficial to you. So that's interesting to see. But I stand by the going the API route. I think that might be a little more upfront work and more upfront expense for you guys to get it product and market ready, to do something like that. But I think you're going to get a much bigger bang for your buck.
Yeah.
What about like, just to try and get a little bit of more exposure, like not giving it away, but basically like trialing it and getting some people, and I hate using the word influencer, but like let's just pick on someone you mentioned, like a Josh Braun, who talks about the personalization, but let's say he said, hey man, like we'll pay you this for you to try it and talk about your results. I mean, I know there's a lot of eyeballs on all the content he puts out. I don't know if that would make any sense. Yeah,
well, and that's, before we get to those conversations, I wanted to just get some sales rebels out in the wild to say, hey, is this stupid, or is this like, yeah, no, we can track that. I will say, from like the actual product feature standpoint, right now we can identify where any of these people have appeared, right? And then we can also add all of those appearances into like lists or like curated lists. So you could really build out like your account list, each of your accounts, based on any of like your tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 contacts, and like basically curate a playlist, if you will. So you have incredible insight and depth of knowledge for your key stakeholders. And then when you present that to them, you say, well, are you going to you going to refute the things you said on the podcast, or like it sounds like the three of you, Mr. VP of Sales, Mr. VP of Marketing, and Miss, CTO, like it sounds like you're all saying the same thing here. Here's how our product helps with what your core initiative is, whatever. So yeah, there's that. But I think the next step from the product side is, instead of having the reps or whoever's utilizing Podchaser Pro to do this, instead of them having to listen through a 45, 90-minute podcast, whatever, that's sell time. Like they shouldn't be doing that. We'll have transcripts coming either, again, engineering, if you're listening, I'm sorry, but before end of Q1. So like, instead of having to listen and play back even at a 1.5 or 2x speed, like there'll be a transcript there. So you can just pull the quote out, literally copy and paste that quote into your cold email or whatever, and just you're off to the races.
Trent, just a quick question. Are you using this use case? Are you using it yourself?
We are, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay,
we're dog fooding this.
Yeah, what type of results are you seeing? Because, that'd be interesting.
We are 2 days in, which means everyone's received one email thus far at most.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But that's exactly why, like, I appreciate that question, because I wouldn't do this if it didn't work for us, right? So
So you're saying that the email you sent JC about spandex was open?
Yes. Yes.
My God, I want to see Patrick's customized email here.
This
This
is
is
a
some pretty
PG
fucked
show.
up things.
This is a PG.
As I say that.
There's like 10 children watching. Oh man, that's funny. But like, I think this is a great idea. It really is. I mean, because you get some great thought leaders on these podcasts that are just, and I mean, again, going back to the enterprise space, like if you have someone that can extract like this grandiose statement or something and really start a really cool intellectual conversation, as opposed to just trying to sales pitch, and you develop that relationship, in that manner, man, home run. You're going to have a customer and a lead that's going to, I mean, I think kudos to a sales rep that's able to do that. So, I mean, I'm excited to see how my customers are ICP target accounts are all the way up to 1 billion in all the different verticals, but the product we're selling is actually favorable for enterprise. I mean, the big dogs in the world are using it already. And it's like, okay, well, that's who we need to target. And, using something like this, especially surrounding the topic of big data or data migrations or whatever we're trying to talk about, would be huge, so I'm interested to hear what happens from your own, eating the dog food, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
I would think those transcripts will be huge too, right? Because like you said, time is like, if you get a team of 15 SDRs like JC, they don't have they're not going to go listen to that. And I'm also trying to think, like, is there I don't know if it's Lavender-esque, but like a tool that could help you craft the email? Because let's be honest, I mean, the context switching a lot of us have to do, we don't, from big data to now cybersecurity, it's like, so if the tool could almost help, and I'm not maybe saying your tool, but if there was like a match made in heaven that could like pull some of your content and help craft that email, I mean, maybe that's somebody's already doing that. Like, I think that would copy AI do.
Yeah, I was going to say something GPT-3 driven would probably help bridge that gap for sure.
I mean, it's almost spooky that, the right tool could write the right email by just sucking the data out of your tool. But that's ultimately where we're heading, right? Like in terms of the volume we want to be spitting out.
Yeah. So a couple of objections that I think we're going to get that I want to surface with you guys, and Amy, you kind of alluded to this. Well, like, my buyers don't appear on podcasts or whatever. And for that exact purpose, like I ran a very simple exercise. Like, can I find the most influential people in DevOps and figure out if they're actively podcasting? And I did it, and I could find it. And I have like a curated playlist of the top 14 DevOps like podcasts that have ever been released, so long as they weren't released more than 2 years ago, right? Like, so the most cutting edge information about DevOps as told by thought leaders in that space, right? Some of them are going to be account fit. Some of them probably aren't on a target list at all, but and that's like the secondary part of what I think this value prop could be is like, yes, you can actually use your prospects' words to sell them to them, like duh, that's first and foremost, but as means of like industry training or vertical training for new hires, like if you can, but I alluded to this too, like when I first started trying to do personalization, again, I would listen to an 1.5 hour podcast, probably multiple times. I would take notes with like my pen and paper and try to like port that back into some sort of piece of technology because I was trying to learn how to sell into VP of finance, right? So instead of having to do that, like if you could just again curate, like here are the tastemakers in finance right now for B2B SaaS mid-market. And that's what you go study, Mr. SDR, when you step in day one. And this is how you're going to work with your AE and producing like customized relevant content based on what we know through this research. So again, I don't think small teams are going to use, maybe small teams will, but like, I don't think SMBs are going to use this because they're just not going to be able to get all of their arms wrapped around that. It's got to be an enterprise or an API partner. So
yeah, I agree. And I don't think you necessarily, like, even if your prospects aren't in podcasts themselves, I think the idea of creating conversation surrounding a big think tank, you know, a bit, you know, the big players in their vertical, their industry, what are they saying, you know, using that content in emails. I mean, that comes down to the customization again too.
Totally.
And that's important, but yeah, that's going to be, you know, it's phenomenal what you're doing. The transcripts and everything are going to be really hugely beneficial, but it's going to be figuring out how to package that and sell it.
Yes. And that's where I'd like to take the next part of the conversation. Packaging that up contextually. This all sounds great. Like you guys are all nodding your head like, oh, cool. Like, what is most convincing to you as like prospective users? Is it like seeing the actual tool in the wild? So like getting a product tour, basically. Is it, hey, here's like a freemium version where you can run your first X number of searches, and then if you want to keep going with it, you have to pay. I guess like what do you see as being like the most beneficial path to purchase from where you guys sit?
Is this like if sorry, Zineb, I was going to ask, like,
Yeah,
are you
go
just
ahead.
asking in general, or if all of us got an email that you were prospecting us in our inbox, what would we want to know that you can offer?
Yeah.
I guess all the above.
All the above, right?
Go ahead, Zineb.
And I was just going to say, I'm not your IC, but I would love to try that. And the first thing that comes to mind is, you know, I'm already using whatever tool I'm using for emails, and I would love to try that on top of that, right? And see and do my own A/B testing. Again, I'm not your IC, but in terms of the model, the first thing that comes to mind is, you know, SparkToro. For example, you've got free searches, and they keep giving you free searches that you could just look people up and see, you know, which accounts, even podcasts, right, that they listen to. But yeah.
Cool.
Well, and kind of to get almost like Inception-esque, like if you were to prospect Amy, if that email could say, hey, we know you're selling into 1, 2, 3 industry, and if there's a way that you can easily provide data that say, you know, we have this, I don't know, maybe there's some keywords, you know, we have 1,000 minutes of content around your industry. You know, if I was Amy, I might be like, well, heck, that's a lot. And then, you know, there's probably like a little GIF of your product tour, and then click here to take it for a test drive, something like that. I don't know.
An embedded clip of the actual podcast.
Yeah.
Would be awesome. And a, you know, prospecting. I mean, something that's going to make me go, what is this? But yeah, I think so. I think that would be good.
Cool.
I think coming up with like a generalized, but then that's very specific outbound research you have to do.
Well, and when you mentioned the
Yes,
DevOps thing, it was interesting because I think we're all kind of in the SaaS world, and so we're like in this echo chamber, and there's all these amazing tools. But I know sometimes when I'll talk to people outside of this industry, I don't want to say they're not as sophisticated. They're like, some of us use a CRM, and that's like it. And so when I think of podcasts, yes, I listen to some sales tech, but then like for long drives, they're like nothing to do with, they're like, you know, cooking, travel, but all that content probably is incredibly useful to someone selling into, I don't know how many different industries there are outside. So I guess where I'm going with that is, I mean, it's obvious to us, how would we market to sales or sell, but there's all these other industries where they may not even know something like this is available.
Yeah.
Like who knows what the top kind of podcast areas are, but there's, I don't know, like there's
What are
every genre.
I mean, what's
Yeah,
what's the top? I mean, probably sales and business, right? Would probably be the top genre, I would think. But what's the next, sports maybe? Or
I think it's more so like news, sports, business, and then like subset, and then entertainment. And entertainment would include music, comedy, people that watch TV shows and podcast about watching the TV shows, like those types of things.
yeah.
Like, I'm just thinking there's probably some companies out there that are selling and they're like, there is no Zoom info or super like some database of the people or the information,
Right.
but our listeners or our people are on podcasts. And those just can't come to me right now, but like, I'm sure there's like, you're tapping into something that just isn't, I don't think, that common.
Right. And that's why we've had so much success with the PR agencies, because like, again, PR used to be find a press contact or a media newsroom, pitch them on a story, they would run it, it would appear in local news, print news, whatever. Since, podcasting's really taken off, it's a different channel. And like a lot of the PR agencies have media databases, but they don't have a podcast database. And all of a sudden, shifting consumer preferences, whatever, like they're losing out on market share, and their customers are getting upset because they say, why am I not on Rachel Hollis's podcast? We spend enough with you that we should be getting those types of opportunities. So
like maybe, an airline or a travel company, right? Like, we know that these people are listening to these travel shows. So like there's all these angles that are not tech or sales related that their sales team selling for American Express, their sales team selling for, I mean, you name it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously I'm attacking this from like a sales SaaS thing, because the multiples for that are crazy. I mean, you look at Outreach, you look at HubSpot, you look at all the major players in that space. Like, enterprise money is real money. Not to say like we're shunning the other industries, but like if we can make significant headway in this, I think there's a really nice growth curve for us. So
it's just that, I think we all know, like in our world, we all have all these tools, and so it's like, oh, another, like JC was mentioning, like another Chrome extension, like
right.
I don't have room.
Yeah, and I was just thinking that, from what everyone was saying, there are two types of uses, right? You can say, use this tool, it'll help you start the conversations, like Amy was saying. So that's a great conversation starter. And we all know that in an email, the first sentence is, its job is to get you to read the second one, et cetera, right? So that's one, but is it strong enough in comparison to, this, they're on, you've got 20 other podcasts of topics, or where your IC is talking about a specific topic, or that's I don't know if that made sense or not, because it's one is just opening, and it's a big thing to open a conversation. It really is, but in comparison to the other one,
well, that's what the latter is, what the tool does now. So like I'm basically shoehorning a use case for like this opening of a personalization with what the product already offers. So ultimately, like I think our own case study on it is going to dictate like how strong is the opening versus how strong is it just from like a pure research database perspective.
Interesting.
So now we're thinking about like top funnel, right? So using this tool to help SDRs to hyper personalize the messages. So Francois says, "Oh wow, JC is doing a heck of a job." But what about thinking like further ahead in the funnel? So try to think like conversational intelligence, and maybe I can uncover some insight. So I got to Francois. One word, we're in a conversation. I hand out that opportunity to my AE, my senior AE, and he's just trying to find like what's the trigger that he can bring up to make Francois get into that headspace of like, oh wow, okay, we're really connected. Like what I talked about, the pain I talked about 3 months ago that I even remembered. Like GC brought up. How? I have no idea. But he's like kind of reading my mind one way or another. So maybe integrating this into a gong or a chorus or wingman could be um, you know, better used in a way to help help my AE get closer to the cell instead of just using it to cut through the noise and come up as like, oh my god, like where he got this information from.
Yeah.
He invested so many hours in. So maybe it's kind of using what you have for like a closing role. I don't know.
So are you saying, JC, just because what I'm hearing is maybe you take some of those call recording analytics and then marry them and say, okay, we talked to Trent and here's a bunch of the keywords or attributes we're looking for on both sides, and kind of marry them and kind of go, hey, you talked to him about these pains 3 months ago. He talked about it on this podcast. So weave that into then the next messaging you send them. Is it a little bit of that?
Yeah, a little bit of that, but I think mine was more about like I've been in conversation with you, going to recording and giving me all these insights. But then this, the plugin or whatever you might call it, might give you some insight on like how you were thinking about this idea a long time ago. So I can come into the next conversation and bring that idea to you because I learned it from, the tool, so I can use it to my advantage. Like I'm a senior, I can use it to my advantage and get maybe the conversation stalled for whatever reason. But with this, I can push it forward. So it was more of like just leveraging this amazing database of information. And it may happen or it may not that my lead has been in a podcast. It's gonna be hard to know. But if there is, like, heck, I want to use that information to make sure that we continue. So
totally. And I think it can be used in any stage, right? We've obviously framed this up primarily from an opening or like SDR driven net new first conversation, but like that information that you can attain through any of these can be used in any part of it, right? It's kind of at the discretion of the sales team. And again, is this another tool that the AE is going to start to use to figure like, okay, my deal's been stuck for 2.5 months. Like, let me go back to the drawing board. I mean, when I was an AE, I don't think I did a lot of that other than trying to find like a good way to get them to pick up my phone call again. But especially for enterprise, like what else are you gonna do? You're not gonna get more accounts, like your account list, your account list. So, so to me, that seems like it would require a lot more product marketing from our standpoint, like for the different use cases. So if you're an SDR, here's how you can use Podchaser. If you're an AE, here's how you can use Podchaser. And then also doing like at every stage of the funnel or every stage of your deal cycle, whatever, like here's some of the ways that popular ways that you can leverage this data to get closer to sale.
I think I'll say, I think that ends up being more work on your end. Then I think you probably invest more than you get out of that. Because I mean, we have to look at time as money. And I think that's a lot of time that you guys would put into creating that content, where the content you already have, your database, your data is already the most valuable thing that you guys have in your pocket.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, one of the things that just popped to my mind is, what industries is the data most relevant to outside of the PR and branding, and it's entertainment, and how could you leverage it within a very, very specific verticals, and you do a go-to-market test in that vertical so that you guys aren't spreading yourself too thin, trying to, market this to a market that may not even be there and may never be there.
Yeah.
And then your time is, you're making more money for your time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like entertainment industry, that's sort of like, using the data that you guys have and being able to show them how they could use that within their own prospecting, whether it's, a talent agency or something like that. I think that would be a really good, useful, a good use case. And I think, or you get more of a use case out of it. And I think for your time as a company, investment wise, you'd be spending a lot less than trying to overdevelop this into something that it's not. Like, you'll never be able to necessarily fill all those roles. And, you might get, 3 accounts, with AEs that would use your product. And then it's like, well, we just spent all this time creating all this content, and, we got $100 customer.
Sure. We'll be a lot more than that, but yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Like,
yeah.
Just dumbing it down a bit, but
sure.
yeah, I think going back to the drawing board and just figuring out what are your strongest verticals, and then targeting those and seeing, how they would implement it, and putting themselves in their shoes and creating content specific to that, is probably your best use of time, especially considering that you guys could go public, in 2 or 3 years. So
sure,
and it could take you that long to develop this concept out,
right?
Realistically. So
yeah.
Patrick, I'm trying to read your mind, and I feel like you're
really
going, how is this going to help me make more better relevant memes?
Yeah, can you get like an AI meme builder?
you want it? You want it, Patrick? I'll get it to you.
I want it more than I've ever wanted anything. Sounds amazing.
Is his podcast in your cache of podcast data there?
Yeah, like literally anything that has ever been published through Apple, Spotify, Blueberry, whatever, like it's all there. iHeart.
Oh man.
Yeah. I'm curious because personally, my podcast consumption, like March 2020 went like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's come back up a little bit, but it was predominantly when I was driving. It doesn't sound like that market's slowing down though.
No, it's not. I actually just tweeted like the 15 podcast advertisers that spent the most in H1 last year, and it's pretty insane amount of money that's going into podcast advertising, and it's grown like 25% year over year for the last 5 years. So it's not going away. Especially, I mean, I don't want to like make any sort of like broad statement here, but like legacy media is dying, and for whatever reason you want to say that is, but it is. And there are alternative ways that people are getting information now, and one of the foremost is podcasts, obviously like Substack and some of the more written versions too. But yeah, I'm pretty bullish on podcasts.
And is your data all English and North America, or like if I was wanting to target people in EMEA and Spanish speaking, like LATAM, is it?
Yeah, it's global, it's worldwide. So long as it appeared in again, like the major
platforms,
yeah.
Wow.
And transcriptions too, because that's
the transcriptions.
That's key.
Yeah, well, I think transcriptions are going to be in English first.
Okay.
And then, again, identifying where different pockets of influence. We actually have, we just hired Norm, and he's our, what's his unofficial title is building the Library of Alexandria for audio. So that's his unofficial title, but his official title is podcast librarian. So like he's actively building literally like the Dewey Decimal System of podcast taxonomy. So discovery, and this directly relates to like search engine optimization, right? So like the way that Google indexes all this information, they have their own way of doing that. We're very much at the forefront of helping like dictate how discovery happens of podcasts from search engine result pages. So anyway, but I mentioned that because he is in Malaysia. So I would imagine that some of our transcriptions are going to be like Southeast Asia first, and then as we continue to build out from there.
Well, random question. What's the weirdest podcast like that you've seen, or topic, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to name the podcast.
Well, I'm curious, like what's the most popular one that surprised you?
Oh, that surprised me. It's really, I mean, if you were to like open up Spotify right now and you see like the top 50, that's basically the top 50 everywhere, even aggregated. So
there's got to be some weird ones though. Like, some like the foot fetish podcast.
Yeah.
Right?
Does ASMR count too? Like if I have the eating popcorn podcast, which you can subscribe to,
Yeah.
it does really well. No, I'm joking. But like, are those like, does that count?
All that kind of stuff is in there too. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
The technology behind podcasts is basically just RSS feeds, right? So like that's how information gets pushed and pulled from all of these networks and players. But I would say like the weirdest, like literally think of the weirdest thing you can imagine, right? So like people who like eating chocolate while sitting in a bathtub of cream cheese, like somebody's talking about that. Somebody's talking about
The
that.
only fans of podcasts.
Yeah.
Oh man. Wow.
Patrick furiously types it in the search bar.
I want it right now.
That was a great segue.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I'm
Well,
I'm definitely gonna have to check this out though. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, this has been super interesting. Anything else you want to throw at us, Trent? I mean, I know we're all down to like, hit us up in a couple weeks if you want to run some other ideas past us, but it sounds like you're like at the hyper early stage.
For sure. We are at the early stage. Like right now, some of the things that I've teased, like finding like different creators who are appearing or hosting information, that's all in there now. You could do that for free now. You just can't do some of like the advanced things. Like you don't have access to transcripts, right? It's like that's not going to work. But you could start to look at that. And I would definitely suggest, especially like Patrick, I looked you up and you don't have no one claimed your creator profile. So I'm going to create one for you. I won't own it, but it'll just show that you are a creator, and I can assign it to like the stuff you're doing at PandaDoc years hence. But like that would be like the one thing. If some of like your favorite creators are out there, but like you see that they don't have credits listed to their names, just let me know. And like we just need to get their information populated in the database. That's basically the biggest help that you guys can provide at this point.
Oh yeah. That's cool.
Very cool. Awesome, man. Well, if there isn't anything else, I'm happy to give a few people some time back. I'll post something about this shortly, but this has been super interesting, man.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys. Again, it's been fun on this side of the table. I love the ideas. It sounds like I have to prepare some personalized emails for Mr. Henry Schuck, CEO of Zoom Info.
There you go.
So Patrick, if you want to help me with like write a cold email, let me know. I'd appreciate it.
We could do it on video and make some content out of it. Win-win.
Done.
Send it
Sounds
the
amazing.
content.
Send in the video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just us
Oh,
using the product.
yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, good luck with everything.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, appreciate
Thanks.
all your
Yeah.
time.
Awesome. Have a great
Meet
weekend. all.
everyone.
Ciao, Chen.
Cheers,
Bye-bye,
guys. Yeah.
everyone.